Had lots and lots of questions about the fixed link. In terms of a feasibility study, where do you stand?
I'm not against a feasibility study. I never have been against a feasibility study, and any claims to the contrary are false.
And who would pay for it if we had one? Can you see it happening as in terms of a feasibility study, and who would pay for it?
Well, my understanding was that I thought the people who were campaigning for a fixed link were going to put it together, and all they wanted was to know that I wasn't against it. I don't think the council's against the feasibility study, and I'm not against the feasibility study. I mean, I just don't think it's realistic because, I can sit here and say, oh yeah, let's have a fixed link, but there's not a chance that we're going to get £1.5 billion to £3 billion or £2 billion from the government. And when the fixed link, these fixed link campaigners came to the council and I listened into that meeting, it was pretty clear that the only way that we could have a fixed link and make it economically viable was to have a population of 500,000 people, which means pretty much building over most of the Isle of Wight. Almost everything that we would have to do financially would be sort of to borrow as much money as possible for decades to come, if not hundreds of years, and we'd still need hundreds of millions of pounds of government. It's just not feasible. If it was feasible and realistic, then we should have a serious look at it. But I'm afraid to say I just don't think it's feasible. And you're talking about sort of how I use my time. What do you want me to use my time doing? Campaigning for something which is so unlikely to happen, or campaigning to save Sandown School? Campaigning to get a university on the island, campaigning to get investment in the railway, campaigning to improve education, campaigning to get an island deal. I need to focus on achievable targets. Otherwise, I am not going to be serving islanders.
I know that we will have a big response on that, and we'll make sure we make that clear on the website.
Can I say one other thing? Mr. Feeney, as he well knows, is welcome to book a surgery to come and see me at any time he wants. I've also offered him a longer meeting, but I said I would prefer it in London because I have many constituents to see on the island. As important as Mr. Feeney believes himself to be, there are many other people who seek meetings with me and whose immediate need is greater, and I have to prioritise. But I'm welcome to see anyone who wants to come and talk to me about anything. So the idea that I'm refusing a meeting with him or any other islander on any matters is simply false. Unfortunately, there seem to be some people, rather than engage in mature debate, who would rather use these campaigns as a vehicle for personal views, whether it's against me or your staff or other people. If they wish to do that, it's a free country, but it seems to me an odd way to go around campaigning.
Obviously, without a response from Carl Feeney, I would happily take one. Carl, if you're watching this, feel free to drop us a response. We've got another couple of minutes or so. Ferry companies. Are you working with the ferry companies? I'm working with the ferry companies. I mean, the basic problem is that their levels of debt are way too high, and we pay for them. And the problem is that they were privatised badly. And I'm very happy to admit that, frankly. A lot depends on what the Transport Board manages to achieve. I have talked with the Secretary of State, and again, it's one of the many meetings I have with ministers. I think there's any constituency MP that is talking to his ministers as often as I do about their constituency. And I spoke to Chris Grading about this last week, and I said, look, is it an option to go down this public service obligation route? Because there's a very strong argument for doing so, because our ferries have absolutely no public service obligation. There has never been an appetite in central government, with a Conservative government, a coalition government or a new Labour government, to have public service obligation on the ferries. I would be willing to go down that route because it angers me that poor islanders pay for rich ferry companies to use their service. Now, in some ways, the ferry tickets are not more expensive than they were 30 years ago. So if you buy a block ticket from Whitelink, it actually probably costs the same in real terms as the Sea-Link ticket did in the 1980s, because I went back and looked at parliamentary reports as to how much those tickets cost then. If you turn up on the day on a Saturday afternoon in summer, you are paying 3 times more, 4 times more in real terms. So again, because of the way that tickets are produced nowadays, there is a very considerable variation in price. But I do not shy away from telling the ferry companies this, and Hover Travels are different because they don't. But Whitelink and Red Funnel, their debts are staggeringly high for the size of their companies, and their profits are 4 times industry standard for significant public sector investment projects where you get a rate of return of between 3 and 5%. For the ferry companies, it's between 12 and 20%, depending on how they add it up. That's what I can see. I wish they'd give us more detail, but they don't. And that's why they're so profitable, and that's why people want to buy them. So if I could get public service obligation, I would look at it. I want the ferry companies, and it's in their interest to cooperate as much as possible with this new transport board. And I urge the ferry companies not to spend £1 million on doing social support stuff, but to be spending 2, 3, 4, 5 million pounds to ward off public service obligation in future, and to show they really care about the island, and to start battling for the island more than they do, because they do have big profit margins and big debt. And does that concern me? Yes, because it's unfair and unjust.
All right. Again, on eyes on the time here, and we'll make sure we ask the ferry companies for a response. Very finally, Ryder Arena, some praise for